This is a tutorial on TurnItIn, the external tool. So two ways you can do it. You can add through materials by clicking add file link external tool. But what that does is it drops it all the way down to the bottom, and I like to organize it a little differently, usually putting the newer stuff on top. So I'm actually, if you hover over these gray bars, turns it to a green dashed line. So let's say I want it at the top. So I click that green dashed bar and I click add file link external tool, and now it's going to put it right at the top. Then I'm going to click external tool. I'm going to choose what school I'm at. So I'm at Eastridge, so I'm going to click Turnitin Eastridge. I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to enable grading, so you can change that. I'm going to add the assignment due date. Let's just say Friday. You can change the category, you can change the scale, and I'm at the high school. And if you've gone to the gradebook session where you set up the gradebook, you can give a little star to the scale. That way it defaults to the category as well as the scale. I usually have it defaulted to formative because I use formative more often, and high school scale, obviously. And then if it is a test quiz or test or a big assignment like this, then I might change it to summative. You can individually assign just like any other material. So if you want a certain group of students to complete this essay, you can give it to, for example, I teach EL. So you might have a different Turnitin assignment for your EL students or special ed students versus your mainstream students. So you can individually assign to each student or to a group. And again, you would make a group within that members section within Schoology, which is a different video. So then you click submit, and you're going to see it pop up at the top. Now you're not going to go to this cog any longer. You're actually going to click on the title. When I click on the title, it will open up some more settings within Turnitin. So what I just did right now, I created the settings for Schoology, but now I'm creating the Turnitin settings. So basically the grade, the start date, the due date, and the feedback date. The feedback date is when after you grade the papers and give feedback to the papers, you mark the papers with your marking tools, which I'll show you in a little bit. That is when they would be able to see it. So I wouldn't put it the same day, obviously, as your due date. I would put it after. That way it gives you some time to give the papers feedback. Obviously, this is where you put the directions or the instructions. By default, it is not enabled for peer mark. And if you look at it, peer mark is basically where students are able to look at each other's papers later and give feedback. And you can set up different questions for that, and I'll show you that in a little bit. If you do not click it, then they can't see each other's paper. But if you, for this tutorial, I'm going to have it shown to enable peer mark. Then you click optional settings. You have different options. The first one is submit paper to, and I would keep it paper repository. That way, when a student submits a paper this year, and then he or she has a sibling, and they turn in the same paper next year, you would get a similarity report showing, or plagiarism report, basically. They call it a similarity report that shows that it's already been turned in. I would allow any type. This is up to you. Allow late submissions. If you don't, then click that off to disable. Enable grading checking using ETS eRater. What that basically means is before the student turns in the paper, they can actually do an ETS eRater and look at some of the mistakes they've made, whether that's subject-verb agreement or those types of things. Then down here, you've got the rubric. Now, the nice thing is that Turnitin automatically has a whole slew of rubrics that are pre-made. So you've got Common Core, you've got Turnitin rubrics, you've got AP rubrics. Now, the nice thing is, if I were to actually click the Launch Rubric Manager, I'd get the list of all those rubrics. I can click on one, and then I can duplicate it and then modify it however I want to for my personal use or based on what I'm teaching for that class. So I can still use the Common Core, but maybe I want something specific that we've been talking about in class, so I can change if I duplicate it, I can change some of the criteria. I can add or delete or modify. I can add, different information in the scale. Then when I go back here, obviously you want these clicked because you want to compare student papers in the repository. So again, you can check next year's essays to all the papers you've received since then. Current websites, periodicals, etc. The only other thing you might want to change is this, where it says students can resubmit until due date. So after the third resubmission, then it generates a similarity report for that essay. So if it's a first or second draft and you don't want that in your repository, it might be good to click on that after 3 resubmissions. And then let's say you've changed some of the things like the rubric, or you aren't allowing late work, you would click Save these settings for future use. And again, I did click that Enable Peer Mark, and you'll notice when I click Submit, I no longer can change that Enable Peer Mark. So if you decide, nope, we don't have enough time for students to look at each other's papers, you would have to go back to Schoology and create a new Turnitin assignment. Otherwise, they'll be able to, well, once you assign peer mark setup, then they'd be able to review each other's. So as you may have noticed, before I clicked submit, I only got the assignment inbox and online grading report. But now that I've clicked the enable peer mark, I get these 2 new drop-down menus. So if I click peer mark setup, I can actually go to peer mark questions, and I can add questions. Okay, I can add them individually, and there are 2 types of questions. First is free response. So students would have to type in an answer in regard to a question. So if I said, did the introductory paragraph have a hook? Now most students, what are they going to say? Yes, or possibly no, but most likely they'll just say yes, 1-word answer. Well, I want them to give quality feedback to their peer, so I could actually have a minimum word limit. So now they can't just say yes, they have to type 5 words. Now, again, you've got students who are going to just say something random in 5 words, but at least they'll have to say something random in 5 words instead of just yes. And you can also score their feedback later. And so you can let them know that they'll get points for quality feedback later. So the other question type is a scale, so a scale of 1 to 5. So you can write, did or how well did the how well was the hook written on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being needs improvement, 5 means exceeds expectations. So those are the 2 types of questions that you can have put into an essay for students to give feedback on. You can also save those questions into different libraries. So I've got 2 by default, I think, sample libraries by default in there from Turnitin. So you can actually pick and choose from both. Let's say I like some questions from here and I like some questions from here. You can actually add from either library. But I'm going to click on revising. So let's say I want these. We've been talking about these last week, and so I really want them to focus on those questions. I click Add Selected, and now there they are. And so when a peer looks at another peer's paper, they will get guidance on how to give feedback. Because a lot of times if a student was given an essay by another student, they would just stare at it and not know how to give that feedback. So here you're giving them some guidance. The distribution just means how are you going to divvy that up, so you can assign specifically or you can have it distributed randomly. So Christine looks at Russell's, so you can assign it or random. The last part is the peer mark review, and that is where a student, you can view what students reviewed. Okay, so you've got that. So now I'm going to go back to a different Turnitin, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on a teacher's perspective when students have already submitted an assignment. And then I'll show you what it looks like from a student perspective as well. So the first thing is So I come back and I've got 2 students who have submitted papers. One, I see similarity 74%. That's kind of high, so concerns me a little bit. And then 0%, that's great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the assignment. And as a teacher, I have a few different options with TurnItIn. The first is that over here, I've got the quick marks. So basically, rather than typing the same thing over and over and over again, you can drag and drop right on the error. So if I think it's an awkward expression, maybe I don't really like that, so I'm going to put it there. And the student's like, well, what does AWK mean? They will be able to click on it and read the definition for all of those. Now let's say this was a really awkward sentence, but I don't want to just put awkward, I want to explain why. I can click on that and give them a comment. Now let's say I find the same comment over and over and over in different students' papers, or maybe even just in this one paper, they keep making the same mistake, and I don't have that in my quick mark. I can actually convert it to a quick mark. That way I can drag and drop using that. The other thing, obviously, is the rubric. So you've got a rubric. So if you've attached the rubric, you can give them the grading for the rubric. You can give them verbal feedback as well as text feedback. And then obviously the other big thing is the plagiarism. I see it says 74%. If I click on that, it highlights everything that Turnitin thinks is plagiarized in red. And it'll even give me the source. And if I click on that, it shows me right within, it gives me a little summary basically of that web page. And I see that a lot of it has been plagiarized or just copied and pasted. And then the question is, well, why isn't this in red? It's all coming from the same web page. I copied and pasted right from Wikipedia. Why isn't this? Well, that's because Turnitin assumes that the student was giving credit by putting in the quotation marks. Obviously, if we want students to use outside sources to support their claims, so if they're using it properly and they're citing it properly, Turnitin should know that it wasn't plagiarized, but they're actually using it as a credible source or a credible site. So that was a plagiarized paper. If I go to a different student, students can actually upload, if you have any file type clicked, students can actually upload any type of file, including from Google Drive, from his or her Google Drive, they can upload a Google slide presentation. So this was actually from Ed's Schoology camp or tech camp, summer tech camp. And so I uploaded it right from my Google Drive, and there it is. It looks just like a PDF, so it basically converts it from the Google presentation to a PDF, and I can still do all the same tools. This wasn't plagiarized, so there's 0%, but I believe it would still check that because it is highlightable, so to speak, so it does recognize the text. So I'm assuming that it would detect similarity within a Google slide presentation. And again, I can just drag and drop the same way. I was talking to a teacher earlier today, and she really likes this idea because she is making Google Slides templates for students within Schoology. Students then are filling out a blank slide, so she's adding blank slides within her presentation, and they are able to take their Cornell notes within the slide presentation, and then she's going to have them uploaded here, and then she'll be able to check it, grade it, look for plagiarism, all that fun stuff that you would use this for. So that is what it looks like from a teacher perspective. So as a student, what does it look like from a student perspective? So I'm going to click course, and I'm going to click, actually I'm not, well, I'll quickly show you what it looks like from her perspective for both assignments, because one she technically already submitted, the other one she did not. So this is the one she already submitted. This was the Google presentation. So here it shows her presentation that she uploaded. Here is a summary. So again, this is where they would get their directions, the title, when they get the release feedback, and then also the rubric that they can look at. They would also click peer mark reviews. Obviously, nobody's reviewed her essay, but this is where she would check that if she was assigned one to review, and also if somebody reviewed hers. Let's go back and look at what it would look like to upload a new one. So basically looks the same, although when they first get into Turnitin, it has a little folder box for them with nothing uploaded. So they would click upload submission. They can upload from their drive on their desktop. They can submit through Google, OneDrive, Dropbox, any of those. Obviously, most are going to use Google Drive, and it looks the same. So they just find the title of their essay or presentation, or even Google Sheets. They could even upload that. Or let's say they wanted to just copy and paste it, or they wanted to type within it. Excuse me, they can actually do that. I wouldn't recommend it because it's not editable later. Whereas, Google Drive, you can always edit it later, or Microsoft Word. So I wouldn't recommend having students do this, but it is an option. And once they click submit, it would look like before, where it has the paper, and then they could actually download it, upload it again, a different version, and then see feedback. And they can actually look at their similarity report as well. And I believe that is it. So I showed you how to view it as a teacher, set it up, and see the different peer marking options. And then I showed you how to look at it from a student perspective. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at mkarasak@sawashko.org.